Hey everyone, I'm Marla, and this is my genre study on traditional literature. We're going to be focusing on fairy tales and how they connect to themes and cultures. So, when deciding the rationale for this project, I was honestly drawn to the standard RL 2.9, which states compare and contrast two or more versions of the same story by different authors or from different cultures. I chose to focus on second grade because that is my placement for my student teaching, and I really thought that it would give a great opportunity to work with this particular genre. Also, there's been a lot of research that supports that letting children build their compare and contrasting skills is really important because it challenges them to use their higher order thinking. And this is such a vital skill set for children because they can not only use higher order thinking and comparing and contrasting skills in school, but also in their personal lives when it comes to having to make decisions. Also, by comparing and contrasting the same story, we're having to focus on minute details in a text, which is going to ultimately correlate to improving their comprehension and making sure that they're retaining what they read. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're comparing and contrasting the same story. So, all of the books that I've created in the book set are going to have a partner. So, overall, we have 12 partners and one standalone in the book set. So, most of them are going to start with a traditional story, fairy tale that we've heard before growing up, and then there's going to be some cultural adaptation added. The first set we have is Little Red Riding Hood and Petite Rouge, which is a Cajun spin. Then we have Hansel and Gretel, and then another version of Hansel and Gretel with an African spin. We have the Gingerbread Man and the Musubi Man, which is Hawaii's version of the Gingerbread Man. We also have Cinderella, and then the Rough Faced Girl, which is a Native American take on the classic tale. Then we have the traditional Snow White, which is actually from German lineage. And then we have a really cool adaptation, which is called Snow White Stories Around the World. And this particular author took four different adaptations of Snow White and put it into one. So I believe there are three different European spin-offs and one African spin-off in this one book. So that provides the reader a lot of access to different cultural adaptations in one story itself. Following that, we also have Rapunzel and the Fair Angiola, which is an Italian spin. And then the single book we have is Fa Mulan. And we'll get into that a little bit more as to how this single book plays into the project. So essentially, the lesson format that I derived for this project is that to begin with, we're going to review theme, compare and contrast, and what those words mean and how they connect to fictional elements of text. And what I mean by fictional elements of text are things like characters, plot, and the setting, and how the author leaves clues for our readers in the characters, plots, and settings. These are the things that we're going to have to be looking for when we compare and contrast. These are also things that are going to give away the cultural elements that are going to tell us, are these stories the same? Are they different? Where did the author come from? Etc. So after we spend the first day reviewing these type of concepts to make sure our students have a firm background, we're then going to go into the next several days. Each day we will cover a set of partner books. So for example, the first day we would read Little Red Riding Hood and then Petite Rouge. As we're reading the first book, I want students to be discussing with each other and myself as we're reading aloud the different fictional elements they're seeing. So what type of characters they're seeing, the setting, and then the theme that they find at the end. After we've read the traditional story, I then would like to flip to our cultural adaptation. During this time, it would be ideal to have the students record the differences and similarities between the texts that they're finding. This is going to come in handy because at the end, once we have read both versions of the book, I would like to have a group discussion on what we have seen. This is going to be really good because we're going to be modeling what it's like to compare and contrast actual books aloud. After we've done this, this is going to take roughly 5 days, 5 or 6 days, depending on how much time we have in our literature block. My school particularly gives us about an hour and 30 minutes. Some schools may not, so you may have to change the number of days that you've allotted for this type of learning unit. I blocked out 10 days total from beginning to end. But once you've read all of the partner books, then there will be one book left, which is Fa Mulan. I would like to read that book aloud, and then I would like to play the Disney adaptation Mulan, the movie. At this time, I'm going to model for the students what's going to be expected in their individual projects. They're going to be using Venn diagrams to compare cultural differences and similarities between texts, and a T-chart to compare fictional elements. So by doing this, we're going to be also not only comparing and contrasting versions of a story, but we're also going to be comparing and contrasting text to other forms of media. They're also going to get a model of what their project expectations and requirements is as well. So here's more about the project. The goal is for the students to individually complete 2 worksheets focused on comparing and contrasting a partner book set of their choosing. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to read the 12 partners, and then Fa Mulan will be individual. They will have those 12 partner books to choose from, whichever they would like to do. They will then get a Venn diagram worksheet seen to the side that has compare and contrast. This is kind of a model of something I'd like to do. But they were going to compare and contrast the cultures that are represented in the 2 versions. And then they will also have a T-chart to compare and contrast characters, setting, and the plot. As far as requirements for this, I would love to see at least 4 differences and 2 similarities for their Venn diagram, and their T-chart charts should have every element covered, except there should just be 2 accounts. I also think a great extension could possibly be that once everyone is finished, to take a class-wide poll to see how many books were covered, and then what overall similarities or differences may have been found, and do one total Venn diagram. So here are the standards as listed before, a lot of reading literature and speaking and listening, and the resources as well.